Before dinosaurs ever cast their shadows across the earth, before the first great reptiles rose from the dust, the sky belonged to insects. Not the small, fragile creatures we know today, flickering for a moment above a summer pond, but giants, vast, whispering shapes moving through the humid air of a world that no human eye has ever seen. Dragonflies with wings as wide as birds drifted between towers of primitive trees. Armored creatures longer than a man moved silently across the black, sinking floor of ancient swamps. Scorpions the size of house cats waited in the damp shadows, while the air itself, thick with oxygen and mist, seemed to breathe with a power the modern world has forgotten. Tonight, we are going back to that lost age, a time when the earth was younger, warmer, stranger, and far less certain of what life was supposed to become. A time when forests did not yet look like forests, when trees rose like green pillars from endless wetlands, and when the ground beneath them was not soil as we know it, but a deep, soft carpet of waterlogged plants, slowly sinking into darkness. Every fallen trunk, every buried leaf, every silent layer of peat was changing the planet in a way no creature could understand. The forests were not merely growing. They were rewriting the air, and from that altered air came monsters. But these were not monsters in the way stories usually imagine them. They were not evil. They were not mistakes. They were answers, living answers to a planet that had briefly opened a door. For a few tens of millions of years, the atmosphere became richer, heavier, more generous. Oxygen gathered in the sky like invisible fuel. It entered the bodies of small creatures and allowed them to cross a boundary that their descendants would never cross again. The humble insect, usually limited by its delicate breathing tubes and tiny frame, suddenly found itself living in a world where size was possible. So it grew. It grew into the slow, armored Arthropleura, moving like a living train through the fern-shadowed swamps. It grew into Pulmonoscorpius, the great breathing scorpion of the Carboniferous dark. And most beautifully, most impossibly, it grew into Meganeura, the giant griffinfly, a hunter of the ancient sky, carrying the memory of a dragonfly but the presence of a hawk. Yet this is not only the story of how they rose. It is also the story of why they could not stay. Because the same air that made them giants would one day begin to abandon them. The swamps would dry. The continents would collide. The forests would change. Oxygen would fall. And slowly, without a single final battle, without a roar, without a dramatic end, the great insects would begin to shrink back into the margins of the world. Tonight, we will follow that quiet rise and fall. We will walk beneath the towering scaled trees of the Carboniferous. We will listen to the heavy rhythm of giant wings moving through mist. We will see how dead forests became coal, how coal changed the atmosphere, and how the atmosphere briefly allowed life to become almost dreamlike in scale. And as we move deeper into this ancient world, the story will unfold slowly, softly, and gently, like a long breath drawn from the earth itself. So settle in now. Let the room become still. Let the day loosen its grip. You do not need to chase the story. You only need to drift with it. And if sleep begins to find you before the journey ends, that is perfectly all right. The Carboniferous swamps have waited 300 million years in silence. They can wait a little longer. Long before the first dinosaur leaves a footprint in wet sand, long before the first bird folds its wings beneath a branch, the sky above Earth belongs to a very different kind of life. It belongs to insects, not the small, quick insects of the modern garden, drifting between flowers and vanishing into grass, but large, slow-shadowed forms moving through warm, heavy air. Their wings do not make a thin summer hum. They push against the atmosphere with a deeper, papery rhythm, a soft, rattling pulse that passes between the trunks of strange, ancient trees. This is Earth during the late Paleozoic era. In the Carboniferous Period, more than 300 million years before the present, the world has not yet learned the shapes that later become familiar. There are no flowering meadows, no bird song, No mammals hidden in the undergrowth. No dinosaurs walking beneath broad skies. The continents are arranged in ways that would seem foreign on any modern map. Vast lowlands spread near shallow seas. Warm coastal basins sink and flood again and again. Across these wet places, forests rise from dark water. The trees are not truly modern trees. They do not carry the quiet architecture of oak, pine, or maple. Many are giant lycopsids, relatives of small club mosses that survive today only as low, humble plants on forest floors. In this earlier world, their ancestors stand like tall green columns covered in patterned bark, reaching tens of meters into mist. Around them grow tree ferns, seed ferns, and horsetail relatives that tower far beyond their modern descendants. Their trunks are straight and strange. Their crowns gather high above the swamp, filtering the light into a dim green twilight. The ground below them is not firm. It yields under weight. It is a soaked, breathing surface of mud, peat, roots, fallen fronds, and trapped water. In places, the swamp floor looks solid, but beneath its skin lies a soft darkness. Every fallen stem sinks slowly. Every layer of dead plant matter presses into the layer below it. The air is warm and saturated with moisture. It carries the smell of wet bark, sour water, and plant matter that has not fully decayed. The whole forest seems to be holding its breath. This is one of the first great secrets of the giant insects. Their world is not simply a backdrop. It is the machine that makes them possible. The swamp, the trees, the mud, and the air are working together in a slow planetary rhythm. The forests drink carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turn sunlight into living tissue. They build trunks strengthened with lignin, a tough organic substance that gives wood its firmness. In the modern world, fallen wood becomes food for fungi and bacteria. It softens, breaks apart, and returns much of its carbon to the air. In this ancient world, that cycle is incomplete. The decomposers of the Carboniferous do not yet have the full chemical tools needed to break down lignin with modern efficiency. Fallen plants do not vanish quickly. Many sink into oxygen-poor swamp water, where decay slows even more. The dead forest is buried, layer upon layer, beneath mud and time. Carbon that once floated in the air is locked underground. Oxygen, released by photosynthesis, remains behind in the atmosphere. Over immense spans of time, this imbalance changes the sky. The air grows richer in oxygen than the air of the present. It may rise far above the modern level of about 21%, reaching values often estimated near 30%, and, in some intervals, perhaps higher. The exact number varies through time and remains a subject of scientific refinement, but the larger pattern is clear. For a while, Earth carries an atmosphere that gives unusual power to small breathing creatures. The air itself becomes part of evolution. This matters especially for insects and their relatives, because their bodies do not breathe like mammal bodies. They do not use lungs connected to blood in the same way. Instead, many insects draw air through tiny openings along the sides of the body. From there, oxygen moves through branching internal tubes, spreading directly toward tissues. It is an elegant system for a small body, but it becomes difficult as size increases. In a larger body, oxygen must travel farther. The tubes must take up more space. At modern oxygen levels, this creates a strong limit. In the Carboniferous, that limit loosens. Richer oxygen allows diffusion to serve larger bodies. The dense, moist air gives wings more substance to push against. Growth, flight, and power become possible at scales that later seem almost unreal. The result is not fantasy. It is biology answering a rare opportunity. The atmosphere opens a door, and arthropods move through it. On the swamp floor, Arthropleura passes between fallen trunks like a segmented shadow. Its body is long, armored, and many-legged, moving with a steady wave that runs from front to back. It is often imagined as a creature of fear, yet the evidence suggests a quieter life, perhaps feeding on plant material and helping process the immense litter of the coal forests. Its size is still astonishing. It is one of the largest land invertebrates known from the fossil record, a reminder that peaceful animals can look strange when they belong to a world no longer present. In darker spaces, Pulmonoscorpius waits close to wet ground. It is a scorpion from the early Carboniferous of what is now Scotland, much larger than modern familiar forms. Its body carries the old design of claw, armor, and curved tail, but enlarged by an atmosphere that supports more ambitious respiration. It belongs to a forest where the boundaries between water, land, and shadow are still being negotiated. Above them, the most graceful giant takes the open air. Meganeura and its close relatives, the giant griffinflies, carry wings broad enough to recall a small bird. Their bodies are not clumsy. Their eyes survey movement. Their wings hold the ancient light. They are predators of a sky that has not yet filled with birds, bats, or pterosaurs. The aerial world is open, and for a time, insects become its most refined hunters. The rise of these giants is not only a story about size, it is a story about a planet briefly arranged in their favor. Forests change the atmosphere. The atmosphere changes the limits of bodies. Bodies enter new spaces and reshape the living world. In the quiet swamps of the Carboniferous, Earth shows one of its deepest patterns. Life does not merely live on the planet. Life helps make the planet that later life must inherit. The Carboniferous forest begins in silence, not because it is empty, but because its sounds are unlike the sounds of any later woodland. There is no birdsong in the canopy. There is no mammal rustling through dry leaves. There is no wind moving through flowering branches. The air is thick, warm, and wet, and sound travels through it with a muffled softness, as though the whole world is wrapped in damp cloth. High above the swamp floor, the crowns of giant lycopsids spread their narrow leaves into a green ceiling. Beneath them, light filters down in dim layers, broken by mist, trunks, and hanging fronds. Morning arrives slowly in this world. There is no bright burst of sunlight across open land. Instead, a pale glow gathers behind the haze, turning the swamp from black to green. Water clings to every surface. Drops slide down the patterned bark of scale trees. Thin films of moisture shine across fern leaves. The ground exhales a low vapor where warmth touches the cold, dark water of the night. In the shallow pools, the surface is still except for small circles that widen and fade, made by creatures rising briefly to breathe, or slipping back beneath floating mats of plant debris. The forest floor is not a simple place to stand. It is a layered, unstable surface made from roots, mud, dead stems, and peat. Some patches are firm enough to hold weight for a moment. Others tremble and sag. Beneath the top layer lies water the color of strong tea, stained by organic acids from plants that fall but do not fully decay. The smell is heavy and sour, a mixture of wet wood, buried vegetation, and slow fermentation. In the modern world, forests often smell of crisp leaves, fungi, and fresh soil. Here, the scent is older and more stagnant. It is the smell of a recycling system that has not yet learned how to finish its work. This unfinished decay is one of the quiet engines of the age. Every fallen trunk becomes part of a hidden geological process. A giant plant grows for years in the swamplight, drawing carbon dioxide from the air, building tissues from sunlight, water, and minerals. When it dies, it does not quickly return to the atmosphere. Its body sinks into a low-oxygen tomb. Microbes work slowly. Fungi have not yet developed the full power that later lineages will use to break down lignin efficiently. The dead plant remains, pressed downward by new growth, new mud, and new generations of forest. This is not merely a swamp. It is a vast carbon trap. As the morning deepens, life begins to move more visibly. A long shape passes between the bases of the trees. Arthropleura travels with a calm, rippling motion, its many legs working in waves beneath a broad, armored body. It does not hurry. The damp peat receives its weight and then slowly rises again behind it. Its plates catch the faint light, dark and smooth, marked by ridges and subtle patterns. Modern eyes might search for a familiar comparison and find only fragments. A millipede, a machine, a piece of living armor. Yet the creature is not a monster in the simple sense. Its great size is part of the forest's economy. In a world filled with fallen plant matter, a large body can become a slow processor of abundance. Nearby, smaller arthropods move through the litter. Some hide beneath fragments of bark. Others climb low stems. The swamp is crowded with bodies built from jointed limbs and hard outer coverings. The success of arthropods in this world rests on an ancient design. The exoskeleton protects, supports, and gives muscles firm points of attachment. It is a powerful solution for life on land, especially while vertebrates are still mostly tied to water. But it also carries a cost. It cannot grow from within like bone. To become larger, the animal must eventually leave its old surface behind. For the giants of this forest, every future increase in size will require a vulnerable passage through softness. The ponds hold a different kind of stillness. Their dark surfaces hide aquatic hunters. The young stages of large griffinflies live below the water long before their adult wings ever open. They are not delicate. They are compact, armored predators, blending with rotting leaves and submerged stems. Their world is one of patience and sudden movement. Oxygen-rich water supports their growth, though it is still shaped by temperature, depth, and plant decay. A nymph waits against the dark bottom, motionless among debris, using camouflage rather than speed. When prey passes close enough, its specialized mouthpart shoots forward with precision, drawing the victim back before the water has fully settled. The adult giant of the sky begins as a hidden hunter of the pool. Above the water, the air slowly warms. It is denser and richer than modern air, not in a magical way, but in a physical and biological one. The higher oxygen content allows greater metabolic possibility for animals whose breathing systems are otherwise constrained. This does not mean every insect becomes enormous. Evolution never works as a single command. Size depends on food, predators, habitat, development, and body plan. But in the Carboniferous swamps, several conditions meet at once. There is abundant plant material. There are humid lowlands. There are open aerial niches. There is an atmosphere that loosens the usual limits. The result is a world where large arthropods are not exceptions of fantasy, but reasonable outcomes of their environment. As daylight reaches its strongest point, the upper forest becomes more active. Large winged insects move between columns of vegetation. Some feed on plant tissues, piercing or scraping the living surfaces of ancient trees. Others hunt. The air is not empty. It is a layered habitat, with different creatures using different heights, speeds, and strategies. A giant griffinfly rests on a raised stem, its wings held out, their veins forming a fine dark map through transparent membranes. Its compound eyes are built for motion, giving it a wide awareness of the space around it. When it lifts into the air, it does not need to resemble a bird. It belongs to an older experiment in flight, one based on jointed limbs, external armor, and wings moved by powerful muscles in a compact thorax. Flight in this world carries a strange grace. The air gives more support than modern air, and the absence of vertebrate aerial predators leaves the sky open in a way it will never be again. There are no swallows cutting through insect swarms, no bats reading the night with sound, no falcons falling from high blue air. The Carboniferous sky is still an early frontier. In that opening, insects occupy roles later taken by other animals. This is a rare ecological moment, not simply high oxygen, but high oxygen combined with opportunity. The giants are not just large because the air allows it. They are successful because the world has space for them to be large. Evening settles gently across the swamp. The green light darkens. Mist thickens between the trunks. The pools lose their pale reflections and return to black. On the forest floor, heavy bodies continue their slow work among fallen plants. In the air, wings pass like faint shadows against the dim canopy. Every sound is softened by humidity. The brush of plates against stems, the wet movement of amphibians at the water's edge, the low vibration of wings moving through dense air. This living world feels ancient, but it is also building the future. Its buried forests will become coal. Its altered atmosphere will shape evolution. Its quiet abundance will leave a chemical memory deep in the rocks. By night, the Carboniferous swamp seems almost still again. Yet beneath that stillness, transformation continues. Plants keep falling. Peat keeps deepening. Carbon keeps leaving the air and entering the ground. Oxygen remains as the invisible residue of green life. The giant insects and their relatives move through a world made possible by these slow exchanges. They are not separate from the swamp, the climate, or the chemistry of the sky. They are expressions of all three, breathing the consequence of forests, carrying the shape of an atmosphere that exists only for a while. The world before dinosaurs is not empty. It is crowded, green, and wet, shaped by life forms that seem familiar only from a great distance. This is the Carboniferous period of the Paleozoic era, roughly 300 million years before the present, when the land is still learning how to become a forested planet. The great reptiles of later ages have not yet appeared. No sauropod neck rises above the canopy. No tyrannosaur foot presses into river mud. The ruling presence on land is quieter and older. It is the forest itself. Across wide lowlands near ancient seas, the land lies flat and waterlogged. Rivers wander slowly through warm basins, splitting into channels, ponds, marshes, and flooded plains. The sea advances and retreats over these low places as ice grows and melts far away in the southern lands of Gondwana. Each rise of water leaves mud. Each retreat gives plants room to spread again. In this rhythm of flooding and exposure, vast coal swamps form. They are not small wetlands scattered along a stream. They are immense, continent-scale landscapes, built from still water, soft sediment, and the persistence of green life. The air close to the ground is heavy with vapor. It does not move quickly. Mist gathers between trunks and hangs there, pale and slow. The forest is dense, but not like a modern tropical forest, filled with flowering trees, fruit, vines, birds, and mammals. Flowering plants do not yet exist. The modern architecture of broadleaf forests has not yet arrived. Instead, the Carboniferous forest is made from ancient plant lineages that have taken forms their living descendants no longer show. Small plants known in the present as club mosses have ancient relatives that stand as trees. Humble horsetails, now often found along ditches and damp paths, have relatives that rise like jointed pillars. Fern-like plants spread into tall crowns. The ordinary has not yet become small. The giant lycopods are among the most striking plants of this age. They belong to an ancient branch of vascular plants, and in the Carboniferous, they become towering swamp trees. Their trunks are often straight and column-like, marked by repeating scars where narrow leaves once attached. These patterns give the bark a scaled appearance, as though the tree is covered in a living geometric skin. Unlike many modern trees, these plants do not rely on thick, woody trunks in exactly the same way. Much of their support comes from outer tissues, and their growth is adapted to the saturated ground of the swamp. Their roots form shallow, spreading systems that anchor them in soft mud rather than reaching deeply into firm soil. These lycopod forests are among the great engines of the Carboniferous world. They grow quickly in wet lowlands, drawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and turning it into plant tissue. Their bodies rise, reproduce, die, and fall into waterlogged ground. In life, they are towers of green chemistry. In death, they become layers in a planetary storehouse. Over time, their remains help build the peat that later transforms into coal. This is one of the quiet insights of the period. The strange forests that make the giant insects possible also become part of the energy foundation of much later human civilization. The same ancient swamps that feed Carboniferous atmospheres eventually help fuel steam engines, factories, cities, and electric light. Tree ferns add another texture to the ancient woodland. Their fronds spread outward in elegant crowns, dividing the dim light into soft, broken patterns. They do not bear flowers. They release spores, tiny reproductive bodies carried by air and moisture. In the damp Carboniferous, spores are well suited to the environment. Water is everywhere, and the boundary between pond, soil, and air is blurred. Ferns and fern-like seed plants help fill the middle layers of the forest, creating shade, shelter, and a complex maze of stems. The forest is not a simple set of trunks rising from mud. It is a layered living structure, with heights, gaps, fallen matter, and hidden passageways. The horsetail relatives, often called calamites, give the swamp a different form. Their stems are jointed and ribbed, rising in segmented columns that resemble living pipes. Modern horsetails are small reminders of this older design, but in the Carboniferous, their relatives can grow many meters tall. They spread in thickets along wet margins and disturbed ground, thriving where mud, water, and light meet. Their hollow stems and rapid growth make them well suited to unstable landscapes. When floods disturb the swamp, these plants can return quickly, binding the wet ground again with roots and shoots. Together, these plants create a world of vertical green forms rising from horizontal water. It is a forest built without flowers, without grass, and without the familiar fruits that later feed birds and mammals. Its life cycles are older. Spores drift through humid air. Seeds, in some lineages, begin to offer new ways of surviving drier places, but the swamp is still deeply tied to moisture. The entire landscape depends on water remaining close, on mud staying soft, on dead plants sinking faster than they can be broken apart. The forest does not merely occupy the land. It manufactures the conditions of its own preservation. This is why the Carboniferous swamp is more than scenery. It is a chemical machine. Every living plant performs photosynthesis, drawing in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. In a balanced modern forest, much of the carbon stored in wood eventually returns to the air through decay, respiration, and fire. But in these ancient wetlands, large amounts of plant matter escape that return. The tissues are tough. Decomposition is slow and incomplete. Carbon is buried faster than it can fully re-enter the atmosphere. The sky begins to change because the ground refuses to give everything back. This hidden process unfolds without intention. No tree grows in order to make giant insects. No swamp buries carbon in order to alter evolution. Yet the result is profound. The forests lower carbon dioxide over long spans of time and allow oxygen to accumulate. That oxygen does not simply make the air feel different. It changes what certain bodies can do. Arthropods with breathing systems limited by diffusion find their boundaries stretched. Wings can power larger frames. Muscles can receive more fuel. The possibility of size expands. The modern world still carries traces of this ancient machinery. Coal seams in many parts of the world are compressed memories of Carboniferous wetlands. A black piece of coal is not just a rock. It is transformed swamp, ancient sunlight, buried carbon, and the remains of forests that grew before dinosaurs. In that sense, the age of giant insects is linked not only to paleontology, but also to climate, geology, industry, and the long carbon cycle that continues to shape the present. The forests of the Carboniferous help teach a simple and deep lesson. Small biological innovations can become planetary forces when repeated for millions of years. In the stillness of this pre-dinosaur world, the great trees stand in warm mist, and beneath them, the future gathers slowly. The plants are changing the soil. The soil is preserving the plants. The buried plants are changing the air. The changing air is preparing new possibilities for animals with jointed legs, external skeletons, and wings. Before the giant insects rise fully into view, their world has already built the conditions they need. The forest comes first. Quiet and immense, breathing sunlight into wood and wood into atmosphere, until Earth itself becomes ready for an age of arthropod giants. The ancient forest grows with a patience that is almost geological. Each trunk rises from saturated ground. Each frond opens into wet air. and each living surface quietly performs the same transformation day after day. Carbon dioxide enters through the plant. Sunlight is captured. Water is lifted. New tissue is made. In the green stillness of the Carboniferous swamp, this seems like an ordinary act of life, but it is also the beginning of a long disturbance in the planet's balance. The key lies inside the bodies of the plants themselves. As land plants become taller and more ambitious, they require stronger internal support. Soft stems are enough for small plants close to the ground, but height demands a different kind of architecture. A tall plant must resist gravity. It must lift water upward. It must hold its crown in the light while standing in mud, wind, and flood. To do this, many plants build tissues strengthened by lignin, a complex organic polymer that gives rigidity to cell walls. Lignin is one of the quiet masterpieces of plant evolution. It allows stems to become firm. It helps vessels conduct water. It lets green life climb toward the sky. In the Carboniferous, this innovation changes everything. Lignin gives the forests their height, their density, and their power to dominate the lowlands. It turns plants into pillars. It makes the swamp vertical. It allows vast amounts of carbon to be held in strong plant bodies instead of remaining in the air as carbon dioxide. Yet every biological solution creates a new problem somewhere else. Lignin is useful because it is difficult to break. Its chemical bonds are stubborn. It resists simple decay. It protects the plant in life, and in death, it slows the return of the plant to the world around it. In a modern forest, a fallen tree is quickly claimed by many forms of life. Fungi spread through the wood as pale threads. Bacteria work in hidden films of moisture. Insects, mites, and other small animals open passages through bark and tissue. Over time, the hard trunk softens, collapses, darkens, and becomes part of the soil. This process feels natural because it is familiar, but it depends on decomposers with highly specialized chemistry. White rot fungi and other organisms use powerful enzymes to attack lignin and other resistant plant materials. They hold the keys to wood's locked rooms. During much of the Carboniferous, those keys are not yet fully available in the same way. The precise history of lignin decay is complex, and scientists continue to refine the details, but the broad pattern remains important. Large amounts of plant matter in these wetlands are not decomposed as completely or as rapidly as in later forests. The combination of resistant plant tissue, waterlogged ground, low oxygen, and rapid burial allows dead vegetation to accumulate on a vast scale. The swamp becomes a place where death does not finish its usual work. A giant lycopsid falls after years of growth. Its crown breaks through lower branches and lands in shallow black water. The impact is dull, absorbed by mud and peat. Its leaves settle around it. Its trunk lies partly submerged, its patterned bark slowly darkening. In a drier, more oxygen-rich forest, decay would advance with greater speed. Here, the water around the trunk is stagnant and poor in oxygen. Microbial life continues, but it works under restraint. The tissues soften only slowly. New sediment arrives. Other plants fall nearby. A mat of dead stems, roots, spores, and fronds thickens around the trunk and presses it down. This is peat in the making. It is not yet coal. It is wet, fibrous, dark plant matter, only partially decayed. It forms where plant production is high and decay cannot keep pace. The Carboniferous swamps are nearly perfect for this imbalance. They are productive enough to create great masses of vegetation. They are wet enough to slow oxygen-driven decomposition. They are low and flat enough to receive sediment. They are repeatedly buried and renewed by shifting water. Over time, the peat can grow thick, holding within it the remains of countless plants that once reached into the humid air. The formation of peat is a quiet event, but its consequences are immense. It removes carbon from the active surface cycle. In ordinary decay, much of the carbon in a dead plant returns to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide through the respiration of decomposers. In these swamps, a significant portion is buried instead. It descends into darkness, sealed beneath new layers. The forest has taken carbon from the air, built it into tissue, and then hidden that tissue from the usual processes that would return it. The planet's breath becomes uneven. This uneven breath is one of the deep links between the Carboniferous and the modern world. Coal, later formed from compressed and heated peat, is not simply an ancient fuel, it is evidence of a broken balance from a very specific kind of earth. Each coal seam records a time when forests grew faster than they could fully decay, when carbon was stored underground in quantities large enough to alter the atmosphere. Much later, when humans dig and burn coal, that buried carbon re-enters the air in a geological instant. A process that took millions of years to store is reversed in centuries. The Carboniferous is therefore not only a remote age of giant insects, it is part of the history of modern climate. Within the ancient swamp, none of this is visible as a grand process. It appears only as stillness. Fallen wood remains, mud covers it, water darkens it, the next forest grows on top of the last. The surface seems alive and fresh, but beneath it lies an archive of unfinished decay. The ground is layered with previous forests, each one pressed down and preserved by the one after it. The swamp floor is not merely a surface, it is a memory. The same process that stores carbon also helps explain the rise of oxygen. Photosynthesis releases oxygen as plants build their tissues. If those tissues later decay completely, much of the chemical balance is restored. Oxygen is consumed by decomposers, and carbon dioxide returns to the air. But when plant matter is buried before it can fully rot, the oxygen released during growth is not fully cancelled by decay. Over immense spans of time, this contributes to an atmosphere richer in oxygen. The forest is not only building peat, it is changing the sky. This change happens without sound, without intention, and without any sudden moment of transformation. A tree grows, a tree falls, a trunk sinks, a layer forms. The same simple sequence repeats across millions of years and across enormous wetlands. Repetition gives small acts planetary power. The invention of lignin allows plants to rise. The incomplete decay of lignin-rich tissues allows carbon to be buried. The burial of carbon allows oxygen to accumulate. The accumulation of oxygen prepares the world for larger arthropods. In this way, the age of giant insects begins not with an insect, but with wood that will not easily disappear. The armored bodies and broad wings of the Carboniferous are rooted in the chemistry of plants and the stillness of swamps. The great creatures of the air and ground are built from a chain of causes that begins in green tissue, passes through black water, sinks into peat, and rises again as oxygen. The forest's dead matter becomes the forest's gift to animal life, a slow release of possibility into the atmosphere. The burial of the Carboniferous forests is not a single event. It is a long, repeated habit of the planet. Across low coastal basins, plants grow, die, sink, and are covered. Rivers bring fine sediment. Seas move in and out across the flat land. New forests root above older forests. Beneath the living surface, the remains of green worlds are pressed into darkness. Carbon that once floated freely in the atmosphere is taken out of circulation and stored below the swamp. At first, the change is almost invisible. A single fallen trunk means little to a planet. A single buried frond cannot alter the sky. But Earth's deep transformations rarely begin with one dramatic moment. They begin with repetition. The same act occurs in thousands of swamps, across immense lowlands, through millions of years. Forests draw carbon dioxide from the air. Waterlogged ground prevents full decay. Peat thickens. Carbon stays buried. Oxygen remains above. Slowly, the chemistry of the atmosphere drifts away from its earlier state. This is the great imbalance of the Carboniferous world. Photosynthesis and decomposition are no longer perfectly matched. In a balanced cycle, green plants take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, while animals, microbes, and fungi consume oxygen and return carbon dioxide through respiration and decay. The two halves of the cycle do not cancel each other exactly at every moment, but over long spans they tend toward exchange. Carbon moves through air, water, soil, and bodies. Oxygen rises and falls within limits shaped by life and geology. In the Carboniferous coal swamps, one part of this cycle is weakened. The forest continues to inhale carbon dioxide. It continues to build leaves, stems, roots, bark, and spores. It continues to release oxygen into the air. But much of the dead plant matter does not fully return. It is hidden in low-oxygen mud before decomposers can finish the work. The carbon remains in the ground, while the oxygen produced during the plant's life remains in the atmosphere. The system begins to lean in one direction. This leaning is not simple, and it is not controlled by forests alone. Volcanoes release gases. Weathering of rocks consumes carbon dioxide. Mountain building changes rainfall. Ice sheets lock away water and shift sea level. The Earth system is always a conversation among rock, ocean, air, and life. Yet the Carboniferous forests add a powerful biological voice to that conversation. They help draw down carbon dioxide and increase the relative abundance of oxygen. Their roots and fallen bodies participate in atmospheric change as surely as any volcano or glacier. As carbon dioxide falls, the planet's greenhouse blanket weakens. Carbon dioxide is only one part of climate, but it is an important heat-trapping gas. With less of it in the atmosphere, global temperatures can trend cooler, especially when other geological conditions support cooling. Far to the south, across Gondwana, ice expands over polar regions. This ice does not simply sit apart from the swamp world. It affects the seas. When ice grows, sea level falls. When ice retreats, sea level rises. The coal swamps live with this pulse. They are flooded, buried, exposed, and renewed. The rhythm of rising and falling seas helps create the layered geology later found in Carboniferous rocks. Coal seams often appear among repeated beds of shale, sandstone, and limestone, each layer recording a shift in water, sediment, and environment. A swamp becomes a shallow sea. A shallow sea retreats. A new swamp grows. This repetition produces a stacked memory of changing landscapes. In the rocks, the Carboniferous does not appear as one stable scene, but as a long breathing motion of water and land. The atmosphere changes in the same slow manner. Oxygen accumulates because the balance between production and consumption is altered over vast time. The numbers are reconstructed from geochemical evidence and models, and they are not exact in every interval, but the broad conclusion remains strong. Oxygen levels during parts of the late Paleozoic rise above modern values. This enriched atmosphere becomes one of the defining features of the age. It is invisible, but it shapes what bodies can become. For arthropods, the significance is profound. Their respiratory systems depend on the movement of oxygen through branching tubes or related structures. In smaller bodies, this works beautifully. Oxygen does not need to travel far. A small insect can live with remarkable efficiency, but larger bodies create distance. Tissues deep inside the body become harder to supply. The oxygen must diffuse farther through the tracheal network. In modern air, this places a strong ceiling on size, especially for active forms that require intense energy. The Carboniferous atmosphere raises that ceiling. More oxygen outside the body increases the gradient that drives oxygen inward. The same basic body plan can support larger tissues. Muscles can receive more fuel. Growth can push farther before breathing becomes limiting. This does not make size unlimited. Gravity, molting, food, development, predation, and heat still matter. But one major restraint is loosened. The atmosphere becomes more generous to arthropod bodies. This generosity also reaches the water. Oxygen in the atmosphere influences oxygen dissolved in aquatic habitats, though local conditions vary strongly. Dark swamp pools can still be stagnant and oxygen poor in places, especially where decaying plant matter consumes what is available. Yet, in many settings, a richer atmosphere can support more oxygen entering surface waters. Aquatic larvae and nymphs live within this changing chemical world. The story of giant insects is therefore not only a story of air above the forest, It also begins in ponds, channels, and flooded margins where young forms grow before entering the sky. The rising oxygen changes fire as well. Oxygen is not only a life-giving gas, it is also the partner of flame. In a richer oxygen atmosphere, plant matter ignites more easily and burns more intensely. Charcoal in Carboniferous rocks suggests that wildfire is an important force in these ancient landscapes. Even wet forests can burn under the right conditions when oxygen is high enough and lightning crosses the sky. Fire becomes another sign that the atmosphere has shifted. The same gas that feeds large arthropods also makes the world more combustible. This dual nature of oxygen gives the Carboniferous its strange balance. The air is a gift, but it is not gentle. It allows life to become larger and more energetic, yet it also increases chemical stress and fire risk. Oxygen supports metabolism because it is reactive. That reactivity makes it powerful, and the same power can damage cells, dry landscapes through burning, and turn lightning into a greater hazard. Life must always negotiate with oxygen. Too little, and bodies suffocate. Too much, and the fuel of life becomes a source of danger. In the swamps, however, the balance holds for a time. The air remains rich, the forests keep growing, the peat keeps forming. Arthropods move through a world whose chemistry favors them in ways that will not last forever. The rise of giant insects is therefore not an isolated curiosity. It is the living expression of a planetary imbalance. Carbon hidden below, oxygen left above, climate shifting, seas pulsing, forests returning again and again to the wet lowlands. The quiet power of this process is its scale. No single tree creates the Carboniferous atmosphere. No single swamp invites the giants. It is the union of countless ordinary acts, repeated beyond ordinary imagination. A leaf opens, a stem thickens, a trunk falls, mud covers it, oxygen remains, time passes. Through this slow accumulation, the Earth becomes a different breathing world, and the age of arthropod giants moves closer to its full shape. The atmosphere above the Carboniferous swamps is not merely air, it is an invisible landscape, as real in its influence as the trees, the water, and the mud. It presses around every trunk and every wing. It enters every breathing opening. It touches every living cell through a chain of chemistry older than the animals themselves. During parts of the late Paleozoic era, especially within the long Carboniferous world and nearby intervals, oxygen rises far above the level familiar in the present. Estimates vary through geological time, but many reconstructions place it near 30%, and at certain peaks perhaps close to 35%. This difference seems small when expressed as a number, but for living bodies it is enormous. Modern air, with about 21% oxygen, already supports intense life. It feeds mammal muscles, bird flight, insect movement, fungal decay, and the burning of wood. Raising oxygen by several more parts changes the conditions under which bodies work. It changes how easily oxygen moves into tissues. It changes how strongly fires burn. It changes the costs and benefits of being active, large, fast, or exposed. The Carboniferous atmosphere is therefore not a passive background. It is a force. For animals, oxygen is the final partner in extracting energy from food. Sugars, fats, and other molecules hold chemical energy, but oxygen allows cells to unlock much of that energy efficiently. It is not energy by itself. It is more like permission for a deeper kind of burning inside the cell, a controlled combustion carried out in tiny structures and careful steps. When oxygen is abundant, many active tissues can be supplied more easily, provided the body has a way to move that oxygen where it is needed. In vertebrates, this movement depends on lungs, blood, and circulation. Insects and many other arthropods use different systems. For insects, air enters through small openings called spiracles and moves through branching tracheal tubes. These tubes deliver oxygen directly to tissues. The system is beautifully simple and effective at small sizes. It avoids the need for blood to carry oxygen in the same way vertebrate blood does. Yet simplicity brings limits. Oxygen must diffuse through air-filled passages. As the body grows larger, distances increase, and the system becomes harder to scale. A high oxygen atmosphere softens this limit. With more oxygen outside the body, diffusion can deliver more oxygen inward. Tissues that would struggle in modern air can function in a richer atmosphere. The same breathing design that confines insects today becomes less restrictive. Large bodies become easier to support. Active movement becomes easier to fuel. This does not turn every insect into a giant, because evolution is never so direct. Body size still depends on food, development, temperature, predators, reproduction, and the burden of molting. But the atmosphere removes one of the most powerful barriers. In the swamp forest, this oxygen-rich air enters the lives of arthropods in quiet ways. A large, many-legged body can crawl farther through peat without starving its deepest tissues of fuel. A scorpion-like predator can support a larger frame and more demanding muscles. A flying insect can power a broader wing stroke. The benefit is especially important for flight, one of the most expensive activities in the animal world. Wings do not simply move through air. They must lift a body against gravity again and again. Flight muscles consume energy rapidly, and energy demand means oxygen demand. The Carboniferous sky offers two gifts to flying insects. The first is chemical. More oxygen can feed the muscle tissues that drive wing movement. The second is physical. Changes in atmospheric composition and pressure can influence air density, and denser air gives wings more substance to push against. A wing moving through denser air can generate lift more effectively than the same wing moving through thinner air, all else being equal. For a large insect, this matters. It means the atmosphere is not only richer as fuel, but also more supportive as a medium. A giant griffinfly rising from a tree trunk enters a world where the air receives it more generously. Its wings spread into humid light. Their membranes tremble and then stiffen into motion. Each beat presses against a thicker aerial ocean. The body lifts, not with the effortless magic of a dream, but through real forces made more favorable by the time and place. It does not need to be a bird. It belongs to an older style of flight, one made possible by the brief agreement between body plan and atmosphere. Yet oxygen is not only a gift. Its power comes from its reactivity. The same chemical quality that allows cells to release energy also makes oxygen dangerous in high amounts. Inside living tissues, oxygen can contribute to reactive molecules that damage membranes, proteins, and genetic material. Modern organisms carry defenses against this, and ancient organisms would have required their own balances and tolerances. A richer atmosphere is not simply better. It is more intense. It can open possibilities while creating costs. The danger is even clearer in fire. A world with high oxygen is a world where burning becomes easier. Plant matter that resists flame in lower oxygen can ignite more readily. Fires can spread with greater speed and heat. The Carboniferous swamps are wet, and their dampness helps restrain constant burning. But wetness does not remove the risk. Lightning crosses the humid sky. A strike touches dead plant matter, a raised patch of drier vegetation, or the edge of a peat-rich surface. In air rich with oxygen, fire can awaken quickly. Flames move through fronds and trunks, feeding on the same forests that made the oxygen rise. Charcoal preserved in late Paleozoic rocks shows that wildfire is not rare in this world. It is part of the system. The swamp breathes oxygen into the air, and fire returns some carbon quickly when conditions allow. This creates a strange tension. The forests help make an atmosphere that can burn them. The wet ground stores carbon, but the sky above becomes increasingly ready to release it through flame. The Carboniferous is not a peaceful greenhouse in a simple sense. It is a damp, green, combustible world, balanced between saturation and ignition. For animals living there, fire would be a periodic force of disturbance. A burn could open parts of the forest canopy, clear dead material, change local habitats, and leave blackened surfaces where new plants later root. The smell after such a fire would be sharp and mineral, mixing smoke, wet ash, and sour peat. Insects and amphibians would retreat into water, mud, burrows, or unburned patches. The forest would return, but never as an exact copy of itself. Fire adds another layer to the slow rhythm of flood, growth, burial, and atmospheric change. The deeper insight of this oxygen-rich world is that power and danger are inseparable. Oxygen alone gives large arthropods a rare opportunity, but it also makes their world less stable. It feeds muscles and flames. It supports flight and decay. It allows bodies to grow while increasing the chemical stress of being alive. The giant insects are not living in a paradise. They are living inside a temporary and volatile arrangement of Earth systems. In this arrangement, the air becomes almost like a silent character in the story of evolution. It does not choose. It does not aim. It simply changes the conditions of possibility. Bodies that once would have been too large can survive. Wings that once would have been too costly can beat with greater power. Forests that create the air also stand under its risks. The same invisible gas moves through spiracles, feeds cells, kindles fire, and waits in the spaces between leaves. For a while, life flourishes under this heightened atmosphere, carrying in its forms both the gift and the warning of oxygen. In the Carboniferous swamp, size is not an accident. It is not simply the result of abundant food or the absence of familiar predators. It is the outcome of a deeper agreement between body design and atmosphere. The giant insects and their relatives grow large because the world around them briefly changes the rules that normally keep arthropods small. Their bodies still obey physics. Their tissues still need oxygen. Their armor still carries weight. Yet the air has become rich enough to allow an older body plan to stretch toward unusual possibilities. The secret begins with breathing. Insects do not breathe through lungs in the way mammals do. Their bodies do not send oxygen through red blood cells carried by a powerful heart. Instead, air enters through small openings along the body called spiracles. From these openings, oxygen travels through a branching system of tubes known as tracheae. These tubes divide again and again, becoming finer as they reach deeper tissues. In a small insect, this system is elegant. Oxygen moves directly toward the cells that need it, without the elaborate transport network of blood and lungs. This simplicity is one reason insects are so successful. A small body can be supplied with remarkable efficiency. The surface openings can regulate gas exchange. The tracheal branches can reach muscles, organs, and growing tissues. The animal does not need to carry a heavy internal oxygen delivery system. In modern forests, fields, and wetlands, this arrangement supports beetles, flies, dragonflies, ants, grasshoppers, and countless other forms. Their smallness is not failure. It is part of their design. But the same system that works so well at small scale becomes difficult at large scale. As a body grows, its inner tissues lie farther from the outside air. Oxygen must travel longer distances. The tracheal tubes must become larger, more numerous, or more actively ventilated. Eventually, the tubes themselves can take up too much internal space. There must still be room for muscles, gut, reproductive organs, and other tissues. In modern oxygen levels, this creates a strong biological ceiling. The body of an insect can grow only so far before breathing becomes a constraint. The Carboniferous atmosphere raises this ceiling. With more oxygen in the air, each breath through the spiracles carries a higher concentration of the gas needed for cellular work. The gradient that moves oxygen inward becomes stronger. More oxygen can reach tissues across a greater distance. A body that would be poorly supplied in modern air can function in the richer air of the coal swamps. The change is not a miracle. It is a shift in diffusion, chemistry, and energy supply. The atmosphere does not remove all limits, but it moves one of the most important limits farther away. This is one of the most useful insights from the age of giant insects. Evolution does not happen only inside bodies. It happens between bodies and the world they occupy. A trait that is restrictive in one atmosphere can become powerful in another. The tracheal system is a cage in modern air when size becomes too ambitious, but in high oxygen, it becomes a passage into larger form. The same structure has different meaning under different skies. In the swamp, this altered meaning can be seen in movement. A large arthropod walking through peat must supply oxygen to many muscles at once. Each step requires coordination across jointed limbs. Each wave of movement through a long, segmented body consumes energy. Rich oxygen helps sustain this work. On the forest floor, a creature like Arthropleura can carry a body far larger than any living millipede-like animal. Its size is supported not by one cause, but by the meeting of oxygen-rich air, abundant plant matter, humid habitat, and a life spent close to the ground. For flying insects, the demand is even greater. Flight is a costly activity. Wing muscles contract rapidly and repeatedly. The thorax becomes an engine room, packed with tissue that requires steady oxygen. In modern dragonflies, flight is already a feat of precision and power. In Carboniferous griffinflies, with wings that span far wider than modern relatives, the oxygen demand is immense. The rich atmosphere supplies the chemical side of the equation. The denser air provides a more supportive medium for the mechanical side. Together, they make large insect flight more plausible. A giant griffinfly rises from a damp stem. Its four wings spread in the filtered light, their veins like dark river systems pressed into glass. The body hangs for a moment in the heavy air. Then the wings begin their slow, powerful rhythm. The insect does not float by magic. It lifts because its muscles are fed, because the air has substance, and because the sky has not yet filled with faster vertebrate flyers. The result is a creature that belongs perfectly to its moment and poorly to any other. The respiratory system also shapes behavior. A large insect in a high-oxygen world can be active in ways that might not be possible under modern conditions. It can hunt, climb, fly, or process plant matter with greater metabolic support. Yet even here, size remains costly. A larger body needs more food. A larger exoskeleton takes more material to build. A larger animal may take longer to develop and may become more exposed during molting. Oxygen allows gigantism, but it does not make gigantism easy. This is why the Carboniferous giants are not simply enlarged versions of modern insects. They are products of a whole ecological and geological setting. High oxygen opens the door, but the swamp holds it open. The environment provides food, moisture, shelter, and open niches. The lack of birds and bats leaves the air available. The abundance of plant debris supports large, ground-dwelling arthropods. The ponds provide nurseries for aquatic young. The entire world is arranged in a way that gives arthropods room to explore size. Modern insects still reveal the old constraint. The largest beetles, moths, stick insects, and wettas are impressive, but they remain far smaller than the Carboniferous giants. They stand at the edge of what their body plans can manage under present conditions. Some achieve length through thin bodies. Others achieve weight in protected niches. Many rely on warm climates, abundant food, or reduced predation. Yet none recreate the full scale of the ancient coal swamp giants. The modern atmosphere is calmer, thinner in oxygen, and surrounded by competitors that did not exist in the same way during the Carboniferous. The fossil record preserves this lesson in fragments. Wings pressed into stone, trackways across ancient mud, plates of armored bodies separated from softer parts. These remains do not simply show that giant insects once existed. They show that Earth once offered a different set of permissions. The planet's atmosphere, forests, and ecosystems briefly made room for forms that later became impossible. The giants are therefore not violations of natural law. They are evidence that natural law operates through context. In the deep green light of the coal forest, the reason for their size is present in every breath of the world. Oxygen passes through spiracles. It moves through branching tubes. It feeds muscles beneath armor and wings. It allows the small architecture of arthropods to become large for a time. The giants do not rise above the rules of biology. They reveal how far biology can go when the planet itself changes the terms. Along the floor of the Carboniferous forest, beneath the dim green roof of lycopsids and tree ferns, one of the largest land invertebrates in Earth's history moves through the wet undergrowth. It does not announce itself with a roar. It does not lift its head above the canopy. It travels low, close to the peat, its long body following the contours of roots, fallen trunks, and soft black mud. This is Arthropleura, an armored giant of the ancient swamp, a creature that seems at first like an exaggeration of a millipede, but belongs more truly to a vanished experiment in arthropod life. Its body is built from repetition. Segment follows segment, each one protected by hard plates, each one contributing to the long, flattened shape that allows the animal to pass beneath vegetation and over unstable ground. The plates overlap like pieces of dark, natural armor. In the damp light, they may catch a faint sheen, reflecting the mist and the broken glow of the swamp. Along its sides, the body widens into protective margins. Beneath it, many legs move in ordered waves. The motion is quiet and continuous, less like running than flowing. The animal seems to ripple forward. Arthropleura is known from fossils that include body plates, trackways, and rare, more complete material. Its remains show that some individuals reach lengths of more than 2 meters, making it larger than any living land arthropod. The exact details of its body, especially the head and limbs, have long been difficult to reconstruct because the softer and more delicate parts preserve less often than the durable armor. This uncertainty is part of its scientific value. Arthropleura is not simply a monster from a prehistoric imagination. It is a reminder that the fossil record gives knowledge through fragments, and that extinct life often has to be understood through careful comparison, trackways, and the physics of bodies. The ancient mud keeps records of its movement. Long parallel trails, made by many small feet pressing into soft sediment, show how a large, multi-legged animal crosses the swamp surface. These trackways are not dramatic in the usual sense, but they are intimate. They preserve behavior rather than bone. A body passes once across wet ground, and the ground remembers. The fossilized path allows the animal to be seen not as a dead specimen, but as a living presence moving from one patch of forest to another. It shows rhythm, weight, and direction. It shows that the giant is part of the landscape, not merely an object within it. For a long time, the image of such a large, armored arthropod encourages thoughts of predation. A creature that size, moving through a shadowed swamp, seems ready to become a hunter in the mind. Yet, the evidence points in a calmer direction. Arthropleura is generally interpreted as a herbivore or detritivore, feeding on plant material rather than stalking large prey. Some fossil evidence associated with gut contents supports the presence of plant remains. Its mouthparts are not well known in the way needed to describe every detail of feeding, but the larger picture suggests an animal tied closely to the immense plant litter of the coal forest. This makes Arthropleura more interesting, not less. Its size is not the size of a predator at the top of a food chain. It is the size of a processor, a slow participant in the forest's recycling system. The Carboniferous swamp produces enormous volumes of leaves, stems, spores, bark, and fallen trunks. Much of this plant material resists decay or sinks into waterlogged ground. In such a world, a large detritus-feeding arthropod has access to a broad, persistent resource. It moves through abundance, taking in the softened pieces of a forest that is constantly dying and renewing itself. The modern comparison is small but useful. Millipedes in present-day forests often feed on decaying leaves and plant matter. They help break larger pieces into smaller ones, increasing the surface area available to microbes and fungi. They do not complete decomposition alone, but they help the process begin. Arthropleura may have played a similar role at a much larger scale, interacting with the plant-rich swamp floor in a way that linked animal feeding to nutrient cycling. In this view, the giant is not an interruption of the forest. It is one of the forest's quiet instruments. Its body plan fits the ground it inhabits. A long, low shape spreads weight across the soft substrate. Many legs distribute pressure and help maintain movement over uneven peat. Armor protects against abrasion, smaller predators, and environmental hazards. The body can pass through thick vegetation without needing speed. The world around it does not demand the sleekness of a runner. It rewards steadiness, contact, and persistence. The animal's form is a conversation with mud. The high oxygen atmosphere helps make this form possible. A body more than 2 meters long requires oxygen to reach tissues across a great internal distance. Arthropod respiratory systems vary among groups, and the exact breathing anatomy of Arthropleura is not preserved in complete detail. Yet, as an arthropod living in a high-oxygen world, it benefits from the broader atmospheric conditions that support larger invertebrate bodies. The Carboniferous air reduces some of the constraints that later keep similar land arthropods much smaller. The giant is not separate from the sky. Even while it moves along the ground, it is shaped by the air above the canopy. The exoskeleton gives Arthropleura strength, but it also creates a hidden vulnerability. Any arthropod with a hard outer covering must molt in order to grow. The old cuticle must split. The animal must pull itself free and wait while the new surface hardens. For a small arthropod, this is already a delicate passage. For a giant, it becomes a major biological trial. A large body emerging soft from its own armor would be vulnerable to injury, dehydration, collapse, and attack. The very structure that protects the animal for most of its life becomes, at intervals, a cage it must escape. This molting problem is one of the less obvious limits on gigantism. Oxygen can help tissues function, and food can support growth, but the body still must rebuild its armor. The larger the animal, the more difficult the event becomes. In the damp Carboniferous swamp, humidity may reduce the danger of drying out, and hidden spaces among vegetation may offer shelter. Still, every molt carries risk. Arthropleura's greatness is therefore balanced by fragility. Its armor is powerful, but its growth requires moments of softness. As it moves through the forest, Arthropleura embodies the strange gentleness of many prehistoric giants. Its appearance suggests threat, but its role may be closer to that of a living compost machine, a large, slow feeder in a world overflowing with plant matter. It passes beneath the ferns, leaving shallow marks in peat that may one day become stone. Around it, the swamp continues its deeper work. Plants fall, carbon sinks, oxygen rises. The giant feeds among the remains of the very forests that have helped make its body possible. In the long history of Earth, Arthropleura is a rare expression of conditions that do not last. Its descendants or relatives do not continue at such scale into the modern world. The atmosphere changes, ecosystems change, and the window that allows such a body narrows. What remains is the idea of a quiet giant moving through a drowned forest, not as a ruler of violence, but as a creature perfectly matched to peat, mist, armor, and the temporary generosity of Carboniferous air. In the lower shadows of the Carboniferous forest, the world becomes narrower and darker. The high crowns of lycopsids and tree ferns filter the daylight into a dim green wash, and the ground below receives only scattered fragments of brightness. Fallen stems lie half-buried in peat. Pools of still water gather between roots. The air near the surface is warm, damp, and heavy, with a smell of mud, plant acids, and slow decay. This is the level of hidden movement, where armored bodies pass beneath fronds and predators wait close to the earth. Among these predators is Pulmonoscorpius, a scorpion from the early Carboniferous of what is now Scotland. Its name means breathing scorpion, a reference to the remarkable preservation of respiratory structures in the fossil material. It is not the largest arthropod of its world, and it does not carry the immense length of Arthropleura or the wide wings of the giant griffin flies. Yet it has a presence that feels intensely familiar. Its form belongs to one of the most enduring predatory designs on land. A low, armored body, grasping claws, many jointed legs, and a tail ending in a sting. Pulmonoscorpius may reach around 70 centimeters in length, making it far larger than most modern scorpions. That size changes the meaning of the animal. A modern scorpion can disappear under a stone or into a crack in dry soil. This ancient scorpion is a larger weight in the undergrowth, a creature whose body presses noticeably into wet ground. Its walking legs carry it across mats of debris. Its claws are held forward, able to seize and control smaller prey. Its tail curves above the body, jointed and ready, carrying the old weapon of venom. The scorpion body plan is ancient and efficient. Scorpions are arachnids, relatives of spiders, mites, and harvestmen, and their origins reach back into the deep Paleozoic. Their design combines protection, sensing, grasping, and chemical attack in a compact form. The exoskeleton shields the body from injury and water loss. The claws, called pedipalps, can hold prey while the sting delivers venom. Sensory hairs and slit-like organs allow the animal to detect vibrations and movements through the ground. In a dim forest where vision may be limited, the surface itself becomes a field of information. Pulmonoscorpius lives in a world where the boundary between land and water remains important. The Carboniferous lowlands are filled with amphibians, arthropods, and small, early terrestrial vertebrates. Many animals stay near water because reproduction, skin, or development still depends on moist conditions. The forest floor is therefore rich with possible prey. Small arthropods moving through litter, juvenile forms hiding in mud, perhaps small amphibians or early reptile-like animals passing between pools. The giant scorpion does not need to chase across open ground. Its hunting world is close, textured, and patient. The scene is slow. A small animal moves beneath a fallen frond. Its body brushes the damp surface. The vibration travels through the peat. Pulmonoscorpius shifts slightly, almost without sound. Its claws open. The body remains low. In the soft light, its armor blends with the wet browns and blacks of the swamp floor. When the prey comes close, the movement is brief and controlled. The claws close first, pinning the body. The tail bends forward. The sting completes the act. In this forest, predation is not always loud or large. It can be a small compression of motion inside the shadows. Venom gives scorpions an important advantage, but it is also biologically expensive. Venom is not simply a symbol of danger. It is a chemical tool that must be produced, stored, and used with care. In modern scorpions, the strength and purpose of venom vary among species. Some rely heavily on powerful claws and use venom more sparingly. Others have slimmer claws and more potent venom. For Pulmonoscorpius, the exact venom chemistry is not preserved, but the presence of a sting indicates that chemical predation is part of the design. The animal represents an early land ecosystem in which predators are already specialized, not merely opportunistic. Its respiratory anatomy also connects it to the atmosphere of its time. Scorpions breathe with book lungs, layered internal structures that allow gas exchange. These are not the same as insect tracheae, but they also interact with the oxygen content of the air. In a richer carboniferous atmosphere, larger arachnid bodies can be supported more easily than under modern conditions. The size of Pulmonoscorpius is therefore not only a matter of predation, it is another expression of the world's altered chemistry. The air gives room to body plans that later retreat to smaller scales. There is a useful modern comparison in the way large scorpions live today. The biggest living scorpions are impressive, but they remain much smaller than Pulmonoscorpius. They occupy warm environments, hide in burrows or shelters, and depend on careful energy use. Their bodies still carry the ancient architecture. But the modern atmosphere and modern ecosystems set different boundaries. Birds, mammals, reptiles, and other predators now fill many niches. The large Carboniferous scorpion belongs to a time before those later pressures fully exist, when the damp forest floor offers both cover and opportunity. Pulmonoscorpius also changes the emotional shape of the Carboniferous world. The coal forest is often imagined as a strange botanical realm, a place of mist, giant plants, and slow geological processes. Arthropleura gives it a sense of size and quiet weight. But Pulmonoscorpius adds tension. It shows that the swamp is not only a factory of oxygen and peat, it is also a living food web. Animals seize other animals. Bodies hide, sense, escape, and feed. The ecosystem has edges of danger woven into its stillness. This danger remains gentle in the telling, because it is part of balance rather than chaos. Predators do not make the forest evil. They make it complete. A swamp full only of plants and peaceful feeders would be less alive than the true Carboniferous world. Pulmonoscorpius stands for the sharpened side of that life, the quiet pressure that shapes movement, camouflage, armor, and caution. Prey animals evolve under its presence. Competitors share the damp floor with it. Its existence reveals an ecosystem already complex enough to produce specialized hunters. In the deepening shade, the giant scorpion moves between roots and black pools. Neither the greatest nor the most famous creature of its age, but one of its most telling. It carries the marks of an ancient lineage and the influence of an oxygen-rich world. It belongs to a forest where the air is generous, the ground is unstable, and the darkness is inhabited. Through Pulmonoscorpius, the Carboniferous becomes more than a place of giant insects. It becomes a breathing, feeding, watching world, where every soft movement in the peat may be noticed by something still and armored nearby. At the edge of a dark Carboniferous pool, a different kind of giant begins its life far from the sky. The water is still, stained brown by plant acids, and thick with sunken leaves, broken stems, and the soft remains of ancient forests. Above it, lycopsid trunks rise into mist. Around it, fern shadows lie across the surface like slow green smoke. This quiet pool appears calm, but beneath the water, a hidden hunter waits among the debris. The young form of a giant griffinfly does not resemble the winged animal it will later become. It is aquatic, compact, and patient. Its body is armored for life among roots and submerged plant matter. Its legs grip the bottom. Its colors blend with mud, bark, and rotting leaves. The world around it is dim, crowded, and close. Light enters the water in weak columns. Fine particles drift past. Small animals move through the brown stillness, and each movement becomes part of a silent field of information. This nymph belongs to a lineage related to the great griffinflies, including forms such as Meganeura and its relatives. The adult animal is often compared with a dragonfly because of its general shape, but it is not simply a modern dragonfly enlarged. It belongs to an extinct group with its own evolutionary history. Its life, however, likely shares the same deep pattern seen in many odonatan insects: an aquatic youth, a final emergence, and an adult life in the air. The most graceful ruler of the Carboniferous sky begins as a patient predator in dark water. The nymph's weapon is not speed across long distances. It is sudden reach. In modern dragonfly nymphs, the lower lip is modified into a hinged, extendable structure that can shoot forward to seize prey. This remarkable feeding organ turns the mouth into a spring-loaded trap. The ancient relatives may not match every detail of modern forms, but the broader predatory strategy of aquatic ambush gives a useful window into their world. A small animal drifts close. The nymph remains still. Then the strike happens quickly. A brief outward motion, a closing grip, and the prey is drawn back into the mouthparts. This underwater beginning is a powerful insight into the success of giant flying insects. Their story does not begin only with wings. It begins with nurseries. The pools and channels of the coal swamp provide protected habitats where young predators can grow before entering the air. The adult sky hunter depends on the hidden water world below. In this way, Meganeura's dominance is not a single achievement of flight. It is a life cycle tied to both water and air, to the swamp as a complete system. As the nymph grows, it molts again and again. Each molt allows the body to expand beyond the limits of its old outer covering. The process is ordinary for arthropods, yet always delicate. In water, the soft new body must harden while predators and accidents remain close. Growth is not a simple upward path. It is a series of careful passages through weakness. The future giant of the sky must survive many such passages before it ever lifts a wing. At last, a final transformation begins. The mature nymph leaves the water, climbing slowly up a stem, a root, or the bark of a swamp tree near the pool. Its body crosses the boundary between worlds. Water falls away from its legs. The air, warm and oxygen-rich, touches its surface. It anchors itself above the pool that has held its earlier life. For a time, it is still. Then the old skin splits, and the adult begins to emerge. The new body is pale and soft. The wings are crumpled, folded tightly from their confinement. Slowly, fluid is pumped through their veins. The membranes expand. Their surfaces widen and stretch, becoming transparent sheets crossed by dark supporting lines. These veins are more than decoration. They are the engineering of flight, strengthening the wing while keeping it light. In fossils of giant griffin flies, wing venation often preserves beautifully, making the wings one of the main sources of knowledge about these animals. The name Meganeura itself refers to large or great veins, a reminder that the fossil wing is both a biological structure and a scientific map. When the adult hardens, the air becomes its new world. Its wings extend broad and level. Some giant griffin flies have wingspans around 70 centimeters or more, placing them among the largest flying insects ever known. The body is long and streamlined. The head carries large compound eyes, suited for detecting movement across a wide field. Like modern dragonflies, these animals are likely visual hunters, depending on rapid processing of motion and position. In the open spaces between trunks, such vision becomes a powerful tool. The Carboniferous sky is different from any modern sky. It is not filled with birds. It has no bats. Pterosaurs have not yet evolved. The aerial predator niche is open in a way that later ages will never repeat. In this quiet opening, the giant griffinfly becomes a master of a young aerial world. Its prey may include other flying insects, perhaps smaller griffinflies and plant-feeding forms moving between the trees. The hunt is a matter of geometry. The predator does not simply follow. It adjusts, intercepts, and meets movement in three-dimensional space. The flight itself is supported by the conditions of the age. High oxygen feeds the muscles. Dense, humid air gives the wings a strong medium to press against. The absence of vertebrate aerial hunters reduces pressure from above. The animal belongs to a rare ecological window where an insect can become the ruling presence of the sky. This does not make it invincible. It is still bound by temperature, energy, molting, reproduction, and the hazards of storms and fire. Yet within its moment, it carries a form of perfection. Its importance reaches beyond its size. Meganeura shows how ecosystems create opportunities before organisms fill them. The sky is not automatically owned by birds. For a long interval before birds exist, it can be shaped by insects. Flight itself does not belong to one lineage. It is an evolutionary solution discovered in different ways by insects, pterosaurs, birds, and bats. The giant griffinfly is part of the earliest great chapter in the history of powered flight over land. In the fading light of the coal forest, the adult rests high on a stem, wings spread, eyes holding the movement of the swamp below. Beneath it lies the pool where its earlier body hunted in darkness. Around it stretches the oxygen-rich air that allows its muscles to work and its wings to carry such breath. It is not a creature outside nature's rules. It is nature's rule expressed under a vanished atmosphere. For a time, before feathers, before bats, before the familiar songs of later forests, the sky carries the soft, steady wing beats of insects large enough to cast shadows on the water below. If a human body enters the Carboniferous swamp, it enters a world that is not designed for it. The first sensation is not the sight of giant insects, but the weight of the air. It is warm, wet, and thick with vapor, pressing against skin and lungs with a softness that feels almost physical. The oxygen-rich atmosphere carries more chemical power than modern air, but it does not feel clean or easy. It is mixed with humidity, plant odors, stagnant water, smoke from distant fires, and the sour breath of peat. Every inhalation belongs to a planet whose chemistry is different from the present. The ground offers no stable welcome. Beneath the feet lies a surface made from half-decayed plants, roots, mud, and hidden water. Some places hold for a moment, then soften. Other places sink at once. Dark liquid rises around pressure points, stained brown by organic acids from the forest. A step that looks simple becomes uncertain. The swamp is not a road or a forest trail. It is a living mat stretched over water and buried vegetation, a surface still being made by the plants that grow and fall upon it. The forest above is equally strange. The trunks of giant lycopsids rise straight from the wet ground, their bark patterned with repeating scars. They do not branch like familiar hardwoods. Their crowns are high and sparse, letting greenish light fall in broken sheets. Tree ferns spread their fronds beneath them. Calamite stems stand in clustered columns, jointed and ribbed like natural pipes. There are no flowers adding color to the understory. There is no grass softening the ground. The world is green, brown, black, and silver with moisture. Sound travels differently here. The damp air absorbs sharpness. Movement becomes muted. Water drips from leaves and stem scars. Amphibians stir in the pools. Small arthropods scratch beneath fallen plant matter. From somewhere above, large wings beat the air with a low, papery vibration. It is not the sound of a modern dragonfly passing a pond. It is slower, heavier, and more resonant. A sound made possible by broad wings and a dense aerial medium. The forest seems quiet, but it is filled with softened signals. For a human visitor, the danger of this world is not only teeth, claws, or venom. Much of the danger comes from mismatch. The body is adapted to modern atmospheric pressure, modern oxygen levels, modern microbes, modern climates, and modern ground. In the Carboniferous, the higher oxygen may seem beneficial, but too much oxygen can increase oxidative stress in living tissues. The humid heat can slow cooling through sweat. The unstable ground can trap movement. The water may hide deep mud, low oxygen, and unknown organisms. The forest does not need to attack in order to be hazardous. It simply follows its own rules. Pulmonoscorpius belongs comfortably to those rules. A large scorpion moves close to the damp surface, its body low and armored. It senses the world through contact and vibration. Its claws are not theatrical weapons. They are practical tools for holding prey in a dark, cluttered habitat. Its sting is a chemical extension of the hunt. To a modern observer, the animal appears unsettling because it carries a familiar form at an unfamiliar scale. Yet, in its own ecosystem, it is not an aberration. It is a well-fitted predator of the Carboniferous floor. Arthropleura offers a different kind of encounter. Its long body passes through the undergrowth with steady repetition. Many legs move beneath overlapping plates, distributing its weight over the soft ground. It does not need speed to command attention. Its size alone changes the space around it. The creature is probably not a hunter of large animals, but its presence reveals how abundant plant matter and rich oxygen can support an invertebrate body far beyond modern expectations. It is less a monster than a moving consequence of the forest's chemistry. The greatest unease may come from above. Meganeura and its relatives move through the open lanes between trunks. Their eyes are built for motion. Their wings respond to a sky without birds or bats. The adult griffinfly is not hunting humans, and its prey is likely other insects, but its size changes the emotional meaning of flight. Modern insects usually enter awareness as small flickers. Here, a flying insect becomes a visible body with mass, direction, and presence. Its shadow can cross the dark surface of a pool before the animal itself disappears into mist. The air that supports such life also makes the forest more flammable. High oxygen changes the behavior of fire. Dampness restrains flame, but it does not erase the risk. Lightning can touch raised vegetation or drier plant matter and ignite a burn that moves with surprising force. Charcoal preserved in ancient rocks shows that fire is part of the late Paleozoic world. In the swamp, smoke would drift low through trunks, mixing with mist, turning the green light gray. The same atmosphere that lets giant insects breathe also allows fire to move with greater hunger. This imagined human passage through the Carboniferous reveals a deeper truth. The ancient world is not dangerous because it is primitive. It is dangerous because it is complete on its own terms. Its plants, atmosphere, animals, water, and soil form a system that does not anticipate later life. Humans belong to a different arrangement of oxygen, climate, predators, pathogens, and ground. The Carboniferous does not need to be hostile. It is simply elsewhere in the history of Earth. As the day fades, the swamp becomes darker and more enclosed. Mist thickens between the trunks. The pools become black mirrors. The air remains warm, heavy, and charged with the breath of ancient forests. Giant arthropods continue their slow lives in the undergrowth and above the water, not as invaders of imagination, but as ordinary citizens of a vanished planet. In their world, the strange is normal. The impossible is only the natural shape of a different atmosphere. The giant arthropods of the Carboniferous carry their strength on the outside. Their bodies are enclosed in an exoskeleton, a hard external covering made largely from chitin and strengthened in different ways by proteins and minerals. It is armor, framework, and boundary at once. It protects the soft tissues within. It gives muscles firm places to pull. It helps the animal keep its shape in a wet and unstable world. For creatures moving through mud, stems, roots, and shallow water, this outer shell is one of the great advantages of arthropod life. Yet the same structure that protects them also limits them. An exoskeleton cannot simply expand like skin over growing bone. It is a fitted surface. Once the animal inside grows beyond it, the old covering becomes too small. The only solution is to leave it behind. Growth requires molting, the shedding of the old exoskeleton, and the formation of a new one. For small arthropods, this is already one of the most delicate events of life. For giants, it becomes a slow passage through danger. The process begins before the old shell opens. Beneath the hard outer layer, a new covering forms. It is soft, folded, and not yet ready to serve as armor. The animal absorbs or recycles some materials from the old cuticle. Its body chemistry shifts, pressure builds. The old surface weakens along lines where it can split. For a time, the creature is carrying two versions of itself: the rigid surface that still protects it, and the soft future surface waiting below. In a small insect, this preparation can pass unnoticed beneath a leaf or inside a crevice. In Arthropleura, the scale becomes extraordinary. A body more than 2 meters long must free not only its trunk, but many legs, plates, margins, and delicate joints. The old shell must release the animal without trapping it. Each limb must be drawn out of its former covering. Each segment must clear the edges of the old armor. The movement is not like stepping out of a garment. It is a full-body extraction from a hard biological mold. The Carboniferous swamp may help in some ways. Its humidity reduces the risk of drying during the vulnerable period. The soft ground and dense vegetation provide hidden spaces. The warm environment supports the chemical processes of growth. The oxygen-rich air can help fuel the muscular effort needed to escape the old covering. Still, the risks remain. A molting giant cannot move well. Its new exoskeleton is pale, flexible, and weak. Its legs may not support its full weight. Its armor, the very source of its confidence, has briefly become absent. For a large ground-dwelling arthropod, this creates a quiet crisis. The animal must find a sheltered place, perhaps beneath fallen plant material or within a dense patch of fern stems. It must remain there while the old shell splits and the body pulls free. The swamp around it does not pause. Predators still move. Water levels may shift. Sediment may slump. A branch may fall. A soft, newly molted body can be injured by pressures that a hardened body would easily resist. The creature survives not by dominance, but by concealment, timing, and the slow hardening of its new surface. This vulnerability is one of the hidden costs of gigantism. Large size offers many advantages. It can reduce the number of predators able to attack an adult. It can allow access to more food, greater movement through difficult terrain, and improved competition. But large size also magnifies the problem of molting. More surface must be rebuilt. More material must be hardened. More mass must be supported, while the new exoskeleton is still weak. The animal becomes powerful for most of its life and deeply exposed during a few essential intervals. The same principle applies in the water. The young stages of large griffinflies grow by molting beneath the surface of pools and channels. Each molt allows a larger body, stronger limbs, and a closer approach to the final transformation. Yet each molt also produces softness in a habitat filled with other hunters. Aquatic nymphs, small fish-like vertebrates, amphibians, and other arthropods share the dark water. The nymph must shed, expand, and harden while hidden among submerged stems and leaf litter. Its future wings depend on surviving this repeated risk. The final emergence of a flying insect is the most visible form of the same problem. When the mature nymph climbs out of the water, the adult body emerges from the old skin in a state of great fragility. The wings are folded and wet. The body is soft. The animal cannot yet fly. It must remain anchored while the wings expand and the cuticle hardens. In that period, the future master of the air is unable to use the very skill that defines its adult life. Flight is prepared in stillness. This creates one of the more subtle insights into the Carboniferous giants. Their world is not only about oxygen lifting limits, it is also about the constant negotiation between opportunity and structure. The atmosphere may allow larger bodies, but the arthropod body plan still carries its own rules. External skeletons must be shed. Soft tissue must be protected. Growth must pass through moments of helplessness. Gigantism does not remove these ancient constraints. It makes them larger. Modern arthropods preserve the same pattern in miniature. A cicada leaving its nymphal shell, a crab soft after shedding, a spider resting after a molt, a dragonfly drying its wings beside a pond, all repeat the old drama. The Carboniferous giants do not belong to a separate kind of life. They belong to the same deep arthropod solution, expanded under different atmospheric conditions. Their greatness makes visible a vulnerability that still exists in smaller descendants today. In the damp forest, an empty exoskeleton remains after the animal has moved away. It may cling to a stem, lie beside a pool, or rest in the peat like a hollow memory of a body. For a short time, it holds the exact shape of a life that has outgrown itself. Then the swamp begins to claim it. Mud touches it. Water softens it. Microbes and time begin their work. The living animal continues, larger than before, but only because it has passed through softness and survived. The age of giant insects is therefore not a simple age of strength. It is also an age of repeated risk. Every armored body carries the need to become unarmored. Every broad wing begins in a folded, helpless state. Every increase in size requires an interval when size offers little protection. In the quiet Carboniferous swamp, the giants endure because the world gives them enough oxygen, enough shelter, and enough time to keep growing beyond the limits of the modern imagination. The stability of the Carboniferous swamp does not last. No landscape on Earth remains fixed, even when it appears endless to the creatures living inside it. Beneath the forest floor, beneath the peat, beneath the buried roots and dark water, the crust of the planet is moving. Continents drift with a slowness beyond ordinary perception, carried by the deep motion of Earth's interior. Over millions of years, this movement changes shorelines, climates, mountains, oceans, and the living systems that depend on them. During the late Paleozoic era, the major landmasses are drawing together. The southern supercontinent Gondwana moves toward the northern landmasses of Euramerica and other continental blocks. Ocean basins narrow, coastal regions are compressed. The margins of continents begin to fold, buckle, and rise. This is not a collision like a sudden impact. It is a pressure lasting for tens of millions of years, a geological closing of distance so slow that no individual life could sense it, yet so powerful that it reshapes the world. As landmasses meet, mountain belts rise. In what will much later be eastern North America, The building of the Appalachian Mountains continues through several phases of collision. In what will become Europe, the Variscan mountain system forms from related continental assembly. These young ranges are far higher and more rugged than their worn remnants in the modern world. Their slopes catch rainfall, shed sediment, and alter the paths of rivers. The low basins that once supported broad coal swamps begin to change under the pressure of uplift and erosion. The formation of Pangaea is one of the great turning points in Earth history. As the continents join into a single immense landmass, geography itself becomes less favorable to the wet, low coastal swamps that have nourished the giant arthropods. A supercontinent has a vast interior far from the sea. Moisture from oceans does not easily reach its center. Rain falls more strongly near coasts and mountain fronts, while inland regions become increasingly dry and seasonal. The shape of the world begins to produce extremes. The Carboniferous coal forests depend on wetness, low relief, and repeated flooding. They thrive where water lingers, where sediment buries plant matter, where dead vegetation sinks before it can fully rot. As basins are compressed or lifted, and as coastlines become less broad and shallow in some regions, these habitats shrink and fragment. The swamp is no longer an almost continuous realm across suitable lowlands. It becomes more divided, more local, more vulnerable to climate swings. This change has consequences for plants first. The giant lycopsids, so successful in the saturated coal swamps, are closely tied to those environments. Their shallow rooting systems and reproductive strategies fit wet lowlands. As landscapes dry and become more seasonal, other plant groups gain ground. Seed plants, including early conifers and seed ferns, are better suited to conditions where water is not always abundant at the surface. Seeds protect the embryo and allow reproduction to become less dependent on standing water than spores. The plant world begins to shift from a swamp-dominated order toward forests that can tolerate drier ground. This botanical transition changes everything above and below it. Different plants build different soils. They produce different litter. They support different animals. They burn differently. They decay differently. The loss of vast peat-forming swamps means less plant matter is buried in the old Carboniferous way. The great machine that has helped elevate oxygen begins to weaken. The forests that once stored carbon so efficiently no longer dominate the same vast wet basins. The atmosphere, slowly and unevenly, begins to lose the conditions that favored giant arthropods. The climate also becomes more complex. Glaciation in Gondwana influences sea level and global circulation. As ice expands and contracts, shallow seas move across and away from continental margins. At the same time, Pangaea's growing interior becomes more arid. Seasonal contrasts sharpen. Some regions experience strong wet and dry cycles instead of constant swamp humidity. The familiar Carboniferous world of warm, saturated lowlands gives way to a patchier planet, one with deserts, uplands, coniferous forests, and shrinking wet refuges. For the animals of the coal swamp, habitat fragmentation can be as important as direct extinction. A species does not need the whole world to vanish at once in order to decline. It can lose corridors, breeding grounds, feeding areas, and stable nursery habitats. Populations become isolated. Genetic exchange weakens. Local disasters matter more. A drought, a fire, a sea level shift, or a change in vegetation can remove one pocket of suitable habitat after another. The decline of giants can therefore be quiet, distributed, and difficult to mark as a single event. Arthropleura depends on the plant-rich, humid forest floor. As those floors become less extensive, its world contracts. The large scorpion-like predators depend on prey communities built around wet lowlands. As those communities change, predator roles change with them. Aquatic nymphs of flying insects depend on pools, channels, and swamp margins. When wetlands shrink or become more seasonal, their nurseries become less reliable. The giant insects are not merely losing scenery, they are losing the linked system that supports each stage of life. The modern world offers a gentle comparison in disappearing wetlands. When a wetland is drained or fragmented, the effect reaches far beyond the visible water. Insects lose breeding sites. Amphibians lose nurseries. Birds lose feeding grounds. Soil chemistry changes. Fire patterns shift. Carbon storage declines. The Carboniferous transition works on a far greater scale, but the principle is similar. Habitat is not a background. It is an active support system. When the support system changes, bodies shaped for it must change, move, shrink, or disappear. In the late Carboniferous and into the Permian period, Earth is not destroying life so much as rearranging the terms under which life can persist. The swamp terms become less common. The dryland terms become more important. Reptiles and seed plants are increasingly suited to this new world. Arthropod giants, tied to oxygen-rich air and humid lowland systems, face a narrowing path. In the old forest, the change might be sensed only as a subtle thinning of certainty. Floods do not return to every place they once reached. Some pools dry earlier in the season. New plants take root on firmer ground. Ash lies in patches where fire has moved through. The air still carries the memory of richness, but the landscape beneath it is beginning to shift. The age of the coal swamp is not ending in a single silence. It is being broken into smaller pieces by mountains, climate, and the slow joining of the continents. As the coal swamps shrink and the continents continue their slow union, the atmosphere begins to lose the unusual richness that once favored the giants. The change is not immediate. It does not arrive as a single season of thin air. It unfolds across long spans of late Paleozoic time, through shifts in forests, fungi, burial, erosion, and climate. Yet, for the arthropods whose bodies depend on oxygen moving efficiently through simple respiratory systems, the direction of change is decisive. The world that once widened their limits begins to close around them. The first cause is the weakening of the great peat-forming machine. In the height of the Carboniferous swamps, vast wet forests remove carbon dioxide from the air and bury large amounts of plant matter before it can fully decay. This burial helps leave more oxygen in the atmosphere. But as Pangaea forms, many of those low, humid basins become smaller, drier, or more fragmented. Wetlands still exist, but they no longer dominate in the same way across the same broad landscapes. Less plant matter is sealed away in oxygen-poor mud. Less carbon is removed from the active cycle. The imbalance that helped build high oxygen becomes weaker. The second cause is biological, and it is one of the quiet revolutions in Earth history. Over time, decomposers become better at breaking down the tough tissues of plants. Fungi and other organisms develop more effective ways to attack lignin and related compounds in wood. The exact timing and ecological details are complex, but the larger consequence is clear. Dead plant material becomes less likely to remain as an unfinished archive on the swamp floor. More of it can be dismantled, consumed, and returned to the air. Decay becomes more complete. This changes the meaning of a fallen tree. In the earlier coal swamp, a trunk can sink into dark water and remain only partly decomposed, joining the growing mass of peat. In the later world, more dead wood is opened by fungal chemistry. Filaments enter the tissues. Enzymes begin their patient work. The rigid structure softens. Carbon that had been held inside the plant returns to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide through respiration. Oxygen is consumed in the process. The cycle that had been held partly open begins to close. The atmosphere responds slowly, because the atmosphere is vast and the processes are spread across continents. Oxygen does not simply fall like a stone. It trends downward through changing balances. Fewer vast swamps are producing long-term oxygen surplus. More decomposers are consuming oxygen as they rot plant material. Fire also participates, returning carbon quickly and using oxygen when vegetation burns. The air, once unusually generous, becomes less so. For many animals, this is a challenge. For giant arthropods, it is a direct pressure on the body's basic design. A large insect-like body with a tracheal system depends on oxygen reaching tissues through branching tubes. When the air is rich, the inward movement of oxygen is stronger. When oxygen declines, the same distances become harder to supply. The deepest tissues of a large body receive less fuel, muscles tire more easily. Growth becomes more costly. Eggs and young forms may become more vulnerable because early development also depends on gas exchange across small surfaces and through surrounding water or air. The change is especially important for flight. A giant griffinfly with broad wings needs powerful muscles in the thorax. Those muscles demand oxygen again and again with every wing beat. In richer carboniferous air, the supply is more favorable. In declining oxygen, the same body becomes harder to power. Takeoff becomes more costly. Long pursuit becomes less efficient. Maneuvering becomes less certain. The sky does not need to become hostile. It only needs to become less supportive. On the ground, the large body of Arthropleura faces a different version of the same problem. A long, armored form requires oxygen to reach many tissues along many segments. It must support movement, digestion, repair, reproduction, and molting. In high oxygen, such a body can remain within the limits of its physiology. As oxygen falls, the distance between air and inner tissues becomes more difficult to overcome. Smaller individuals have an advantage because their tissues lie closer to the source of oxygen. Over generations, natural selection can favor reduced size without any single dramatic extinction scene. This is one of the most important insights in the story of the giant insects. Their disappearance is not only a matter of death, it is also a matter of scale. Lineages can survive while their giant forms fade. The world does not need to erase every dragonfly, millipede, or scorpion. It only needs to remove the conditions that allow the largest versions to persist. The result is evolutionary retreat. Bodies become smaller because smaller bodies work better in the new air. Modern insects carry the same lesson. Their small size is not merely an accident of evolution. It is a fit with the present atmosphere, present predators, and present ecosystems. A dragonfly today is a brilliant flyer, but its size matches the oxygen and ecological world in which it lives. A millipede today can process leaf litter efficiently at a small scale. A scorpion today can hunt successfully within the limits of modern air. The descendants are not failed giants. They are successful survivors shaped for a different planet. In the late Paleozoic landscape, the decline of oxygen does not act alone. Drying habitats, changing plants, new predators, shifting fire patterns, and altered climates all press together. But oxygen gives the story its quiet physical center. The very gas that once allowed arthropods to expand now sets the boundary that brings them back down. The atmosphere becomes an invisible sieve. Large forms struggle to pass through it. Smaller forms continue. The swamp, where it remains, still holds mist and shadow. Wings still pass above dark water. Jointed legs still move among fallen stems. Yet the grand experiment is narrowing. The air no longer gives as freely as before. The forests no longer bury carbon in the same vast rhythm. Decomposers are learning to finish what earlier ecosystems left undone. The world is becoming more modern in its cycles, and in doing so, it is becoming less hospitable to the giants of the Coal Age. By the time the Carboniferous world gives way to the Permian period, the age of giant insects has already begun to lose the special conditions that made it possible. The air is changing. The forests are changing. The continents have drawn together into the great supercontinent Pangaea, and the living world is being reorganized around a drier, harsher geography. The old coal swamps remain in places, but they no longer hold the same vast command over the lowlands. The window that once opened for arthropod giants is slowly closing. The sky is still inhabited by insects, but it is no longer the same young frontier. The largest griffinflies fade from the fossil record. Their relatives continue in smaller forms, carrying the ancient design of 4 wings, compound eyes, and aerial hunting into a new world. Dragonflies and their kin do not vanish. They adapt. Their bodies become better matched to lower oxygen, changing climates, and new ecological pressures. What disappears is not the lineage itself, but the extreme scale that once made the lineage seem almost impossible. This distinction matters. Extinction is often imagined as a clean disappearance, a final absence. In the story of the giant insects, the ending is more subtle. The age of giants ends through reduction, replacement, and narrowing opportunity. A lineage may continue while its grandest form becomes unsustainable. The small survivors become the living memory of large ancestors. Modern dragonflies, millipedes, and scorpions are not weak remnants. They are successful versions of old body plans, reshaped for an atmosphere and a world that no longer reward great arthropod size in the same way. The Permian world favors other solutions. Seed plants spread more widely into drier habitats. Reptiles gain importance because their amniotic eggs free them from the same dependence on water that limits many amphibians. The amniotic egg is one of the great biological inventions of terrestrial life. It holds the developing embryo within protective membranes and allows reproduction on land. In a world of shrinking swamps and expanding dry interiors, this matters deeply. While many amphibians remain tied to ponds and wet places, reptiles can move more confidently into uplands, seasonal forests, and open inland environments. This change adds another pressure to the arthropod giants. Early reptiles are not enormous at first, but they are agile, increasingly well-suited to dry ground, and equipped with more efficient lungs than many earlier land vertebrates. They can raid eggs, hunt small animals, and occupy spaces that were once less crowded by vertebrate competitors. A large arthropod weakened by declining oxygen, burdened by molting, and tied to humid habitats, faces a world where smaller, quicker, more versatile animals are becoming more common. The ending of the giant insects is therefore not caused by one force alone. It is the combined effect of atmosphere, habitat, competition, reproduction, and time. Above the changing forests, the future of the sky is also being prepared. Birds do not yet exist in the Permian. Bats are far in the future. Pterosaurs have not yet appeared. Yet the empty aerial world that once belonged so freely to giant insects is not a permanent condition. Later in the Mesozoic era, vertebrates will enter the air in powerful ways. Pterosaurs will become the first vertebrates to master powered flight. Birds will follow from theropod dinosaurs. Much later, bats will claim the night. The aerial niche will grow crowded with warm-blooded, highly maneuverable, often intelligent or sensory-specialized flyers. The old Carboniferous opportunity will never return in the same form. This is why a simple rise in oxygen would not easily bring back the giant insects of the coal swamps. The modern world is not only different in chemistry, it is different in ecology. A large flying insect today would share the sky with birds that see sharply, turn quickly, and strike from above. It would enter nights patrolled by bats using echolocation. Its aquatic young would grow in waters filled with fish, amphibians, and other predators, shaped by hundreds of millions of years of later evolution. The old giants depended not just on rich oxygen, but on an open world. The Carboniferous was therefore a rare alignment. The forests buried carbon. The atmosphere grew oxygen-rich. The swamps stayed humid and extensive. Arthropods already possessed strong exoskeletons, jointed limbs, and, in insects, the earliest mastery of flight. Vertebrate competition in the air was absent. For a time, all these conditions overlapped. The result was an age when the limits of invertebrate bodies moved outward, and the sky carried wing beats that later ages would never hear again. The present still holds echoes of that age. A dragonfly hovering above a pond repeats an ancient pattern of predatory flight. A millipede working through leaf litter repeats the quiet processing of dead plants. A scorpion beneath a stone carries the old architecture of claw, armor, and sting. These animals are not the giants of the coal forests, but their bodies preserve deep evolutionary memories. They show that survival does not always mean remaining large. Sometimes, survival means becoming small enough to fit the new rules. The Earth itself also remembers. Coal seams remain as compressed forests, dark layers of ancient carbon stored from a time when decay could not keep pace with growth. Fossil wings remain pressed into stone, their veins still visible after hundreds of millions of years. Trackways remain where a many-legged body crossed mud that later hardened into rock. These traces are quiet, but they are enough. They show a planet that once breathed differently, and life that answered that breath with different shapes. As the Permian world settles into its drier rhythm, the giant insects fade into the background of deep time. There is no final cry from the swamps, no single last wingbeat that marks the end. There is only a long adjustment. The air thins, the wetlands contract, the bodies shrink. The lineages continue in altered form. The giants pass away not because they are failures, but because they are perfect answers to a question the planet eventually stops asking.